Joining me now. Welcome to the program, Professor Larson. Let me just ask you about psychology. Maybe you can just play off a little bit of what Dr. Tegnell said, because it's a very different psychology that he was working with in Sweden than has been worked here or elsewhere. Just comment on that before we get into vaccine psychology.
Well, we do find globally in our work that different cultures and psychologies and also different political states or epidemic states do weigh on people's anxieties or fears or hopes. So it is a big factor.
So what about rumors? You study rumors, and obviously there's so much of that happening around a vaccine right now. We know the figures. We've heard that according to a recent study, 50% in America who've been asked wouldn't take a vaccine. We've heard in Europe that the numbers are pretty alarmingly high about vaccine skepticism. Talk to me about how that builds, what mobilizes that kind of fear and hesitancy.
Well, we see, because we've been running polls across Europe and a number of countries over different waves, and those responses are very volatile, and they're very reflective of the state of the epidemic. In the UK here, in mid-March and into late March, when the numbers of deaths related to COVID started going up, only 5% of the population in a representative sample said we wouldn't take a COVID vaccine, a new one. Recently, it's up to 14-15% saying no, as people have seen the figures waning. And there's other places like France, 26% said they wouldn't take a vaccine. And that's consistent actually with the background. France has one of the highest levels of skepticism in the world based on our global research when it comes to vaccines. So there is this also background factor of populations that have trust issues with government or anxieties about vaccines. So I think one thing that will be telling is when there is a vaccine, one thing that people will do will look around and decide, is there enough of a pressing threat for me to take the risk of what when there's a new vaccine?
Well, I mean, you're an expert, and do you think that that people should understand that there's enough of a pressing threat? I mean, Dr. Fauci in the United States has said that's his next big nightmare, the idea of this hesitancy, and even if there is a vaccine, even if it is, obviously, good to go, that it won't be taken.
Well, I mean, he has a reasonable concern, but the fact is we don't have a vaccine yet, which gives us time. And one of the big things we've learned and work on, we've worked a lot around Ebola vaccine trials, for instance, and the introduction of Ebola vaccines. And we used every minute in the development and trials to build community consensus, to build community positiveness in situations which are otherwise, and this was in Africa, which are otherwise quite hesitant. So we have time between now and, say, the spring to make people, to build awareness and engagement. I think there's two things we are really hearing a lot in our social media listening and monitoring. People are very anxious, and some of the rumors were sparked by this warp speed, fast, it's going to be faster than ever. That flags all kinds of anxieties about it's too fast, it can't be safe. We need to be more, communicate better. Why is it faster? The reasons are actually good ones. We had a funding mechanism in place that we didn't have at Ebola, and it was because of Ebola there was a funding mechanism. We have new technologies that made it possible to characterize the virus very quickly relative to previous years and decades. And also there's new technologies around how you can make a vaccine. That needs to be communicated better. We need to explain not just it's fast, but this is why it's fast, so people don't feel like you're just shortchanging an old process.
So, Professor Larson, is there a playbook? I mean, how would you advise the relevant governments or agencies to do what you're saying now, to communicate better?
Well, I think universities, health authorities, not just the health authorities, because in a number of settings, part of the rumors and distrust are because they don't trust the health authorities or the leaders. So we need other voices that weigh in and help that understanding. We're in an acute time of uncertainty at so many levels. And I think that, the social media is amplifying the anti and the alternative and the rumors because there's not enough accurate information filling that space, even information that says we don't know, but this is what we're thinking and we're moving in this direction. How are we going to decide who gets one of these vaccines first? Well, this is what we're thinking, and this is some of the issues with criteria. But somehow we need to do that engagement sooner rather than later. Employers, schools, COVID has affected everybody in society. There are a lot of people who should be motivated for a vaccine, but we need to help engage them.
So a lot more transparency, you're saying, and a lot more effort in that regard, in the public communication of the step-by-step process. So let me ask you this then, because the Nature Scientific Journal this week has said, vaccine hesitancy is a problem of dignity as much as of the abundance of falsehoods. Individuals want to have their choices respected amid growing distrust in authority. Let's just explore that a little bit, because it's not just the traditional anti-vax movement that is the issue right now. According to this, it crosses racial lines, socioeconomic backgrounds, educational backgrounds, political affiliations. The doubters, the hesitants, are not a monolithic group. Is that right?
That's right. I just have a book coming out this week, called Stuck. And it is with Oxford Press, and one of the chapters is about dignity, and it's so much about some of the same drivers that are polarizing society at a number of levels. And people feel like they've been left out of the conversation, that science is the new dogma. It used to be that science gave reason and separated from religious dogma. Now that seems turned around, where publics are feeling like science is taking the public for granted. Health authorities are taking the public for granted, that just because science says so, they're going to line up. And they're saying enough is enough. Where are we? Where are our feelings? And feelings is a big part of this.
Many, certainly in the United States, many people in many parts of the world like to think of themselves as good people, as caring people, and certainly caring about their neighbors and their communities. Surely a vaccine, if I take a vaccine, it's not just for me, it's to protect my community as well. Is that a missing piece of the communication, that it's not just about me first, it's about all of us?
It should be more of the communication. And I think certainly, given the ubiquitousness of COVID, it's not just one population group, or it's not just in one setting, it's everywhere. And I think that certainly, as I mentioned, things like going back to school and going back to work, it's about my colleagues, it's about my schoolmates, it's about teachers, it's about health centers. And I think that's another aspect, as you rightly say, that needs to be cultivated, that it's not just about me or another person, which is true with vaccines more generally, but in the context of COVID, it's more acute than ever.
So let me ask you, because again, in many parts of the world, these rumors, these fears get started. They spread like wildfire. Sometimes they're stoked. You have a case study about the polio eradication effort in Nigeria and how that was thrown off balance shortly after 9/11. Can you explain that?
Well, it's a real example of misinformation not being the problem. This was between 2003 and 2004. Kano State in northern Nigeria boycotted the polio vaccination. And it was a distrust. It was a distrust of central government, a candidate from the wealthier Christian South won the presidency over a candidate from the North, which is a bit poorer, it's more Muslim, and that's where Kano is. But in addition to that, this was just on the heels of 9/11, and there was a perception, well, not just a perception, a lot of the West was at war with Muslims, and they were, why would they want to help us? There must be something in that vaccine. There's no other vaccine. They come knocking on our door again and again with the same vaccine. Must be a contraceptive. Must be causing AIDS. Couldn't be right. It was a trust issue, a distrust issue, and you could have given them all the perfect information. It wouldn't have changed the story.
Right. Well, let's hope that we can regain and reformulate that trust and do better communications, because I think we're going to need that. Professor
Yes.
Larson, thank you very much indeed.